saved the Apache girl from the train, and the rancher couldn't resist helping her after the train slowed as it crossed the dry stretch of land where the desert met scattered ranches and low hills. Dust rose in soft clouds beneath the iron wheels, drifting toward the open sky. Most passengers stayed in their seats, tired from the long ride and eager to reach the next town. A few leaned toward the windows, watching the land roll by in silence. Among them was a rancher named Thomas Hale, a man in his early 40s with weathered hands and a quiet face shaped by years of sun and wind. Thomas did not travel often. His ranch sat miles away from the nearest town, and his life followed the steady rhythm of cattle, fences, and seasons. This trip was only necessary because he needed supplies that could not be delivered. He planned to finish his business quickly and return home before nightfall. He did not expect anything unusual to happen. But as the train slowed more than expected, a raised voice cut through the dull noise of the wheels, pulling his attention away from his thoughts. Near the middle car, two railroad men stood close to a young girl. She was small, no older than 16, with long dark hair pulled loosely behind her. Her clothes were worn but clean, and her eyes moved quickly between the men and the passengers watching from a distance. She did not shout or struggle wildly, but there was clear fear in her posture. One of the men held a piece of paper, speaking sharply while the other blocked her path. Thomas stood without fully deciding to. Something about the scene felt wrong. He had seen trouble before, arguments, drunk men, thieves, but this was different. The girl was alone. No family stood beside her. No one spoke for her. The men acted as if the matter was already settled, as if her voice did not matter. "She doesn't belong on this train," one of the men said loudly. Enough for others to hear. "No proper papers, orders are orders." The girl spoke quietly, her voice shaking but firm. "I was told I could travel. I did nothing wrong." Her accent marked her as Apache, though Thomas did not need the sound of her voice to see that. Years in the region had taught him the difference between people, but also how often those differences were used unfairly. He noticed how some passengers turned away, pretending not to see. Others stared openly, curious but unwilling to interfere. The train came to a full stop. The conductor stepped down onto the platform, and the men moved to force the girl off the train. That was the moment Thomas felt something tighten in his chest. He did not consider himself brave or important. He was simply a man who believed that when something was wrong, it should not be ignored. "Hold on," Thomas said as he stepped forward. His voice was calm but carried enough weight to draw attention. "What's the trouble here?" The railroad men turned, surprised that someone had spoken up. One of them frowned. "This doesn't concern you," he replied. Thomas nodded slightly, as if accepting the words, but he did not move away. "It concerns me if you're putting someone off a train in the middle of nowhere, especially a child." "She's not a child," the man snapped, "and she doesn't have permission to travel." The girl looked at Thomas, then really looked at him, as if trying to decide whether he was another threat or something else. Her eyes were dark and steady despite the fear behind them. "Where is she supposed to go?" Thomas asked. "That's not our problem," the conductor said. "Rules are rules." Thomas had lived long enough to know how often rules were used as an excuse to avoid responsibility. He glanced around at the open land, the empty platform, the long stretch of nothing beyond it. Leaving her there would mean danger, even if no one said it aloud. "I'll take responsibility," he said. "She can come with me. I live nearby." The men hesitated. They did not expect that answer. One of them looked relieved, as if eager to end the situation without further effort. Another narrowed his eyes. "Suspicious? You know her?" the conductor asked. "No," Thomas answered honestly. But I know leaving her here isn't right. There was a pause, heavy and uncomfortable. Finally, the conductor sighed. Fine. If she's your concern now, that's on you. He turned back toward the train. Let's move. The train began to hiss and groan as it prepared to leave. Passengers returned to their seats, the moment already fading from their minds. Within seconds, the train was gone, carrying its noise and heat away, leaving only silence and drifting dust behind. The girl stood still, unsure of what to do next. Thomas waited a moment before speaking again, careful not to scare her. "My name's Thomas," he said. "I've got a ranch a few miles from here. You don't have to come if you don't want to, but you shouldn't stay here alone." She hesitated, then nodded slowly. "My name is Naya," she said. "I don't know where else to go." They began walking toward where Thomas had tied his horse and wagon. The distance between them remained at first, not physical but emotional. Neither trusted easily. As they traveled, the land stretched wide and quiet around them, broken only by wind and the sound of hooves against the ground. After some time, Thomas spoke again. "Where were you headed?" "North," Naya replied. "I was told there was work, and someone who could help me." Thomas did not press for details. He could tell her story was not simple, and he did not want to force words out of her before she was ready. Instead, he nodded and kept his eyes on the road. As they traveled, he noticed how alert she remained, watching everything, hands folded tightly in her lap. This was not a girl who had lived an easy life. She carried something heavy, something shaped by loss and being pushed aside too many times. When they reached the ranch, the sun was already low. The house was modest, built from wood and stone, standing strong against the open land. Thomas showed her where she could sit, offered her water and food, and then stepped back, giving her space. Naya accepted the food carefully, as if unsure whether it would be taken away. As she ate, her shoulders slowly relaxed, just a little. Thomas watched quietly, understanding that safety was not something given in words but in actions over time. That night, as the wind moved through the land and the stars filled the sky, Thomas sat on the porch, thinking about the choice he had made. He did not know what trouble might come from helping her. He only knew that walking away would have stayed with him far longer. Inside, Naya lay awake, listening to the unfamiliar sounds of the ranch. Fear still lingered, but beneath it was something new, uncertain, fragile, but real. For the first time in a long while, someone had seen her as a person, not a problem to remove. Neither of them knew it yet, but the moment on the train platform had changed the direction of both their lives. What began as a simple act of stepping forward would grow into something far deeper, shaped by trust, difficult choices, and the quiet strength found in doing what is right when no one else will. The next morning came slowly, carried in by pale light and the soft sounds of the ranch waking up. Thomas was already outside before the sun fully rose. He followed the same routine he had kept for years, checking the animals, fixing a loose fence post, making sure the water troughs were full. Routine helped him think, and today his thoughts were heavier than usual. Inside the house, Naya woke to unfamiliar smells and sounds. The walls were quiet, not filled with shouting or fear, but the silence itself felt strange. She sat up slowly, unsure of what was expected of her. For a moment she wondered if the kindness of the night before had been temporary, like so many moments in her life that disappeared with the sunrise. When she stepped outside, Thomas noticed her right away. He didn't speak at first, only nodded in greeting, careful not to make her feel watched or questioned. After a moment, he poured water into a tin cup and handed it to her. "You can stay as long as you need," he said simply. At least until we figure out what comes next. Naya wrapped her hands around the cup. I don't want to cause trouble, she said. Thomas shook his head. You didn't. The trouble was already there. You just got caught in it. As the day went on, Thomas showed her small tasks around the ranch. Nothing demanding, feeding the chickens, sweeping the porch, helping sort supplies. He did not give orders. He asked. That alone surprised her. She worked quietly, watching him from time to time, learning his movements, his habits, the way he never raised his voice. By midday, a neighbor rode up on horseback. His name was Caleb, a man who lived a few miles away and stopped by occasionally for news or trade. His eyes went straight to Naya, then back to Thomas. Didn't expect company, Caleb said carefully. Neither did I, Thomas replied. But she's here for now. Caleb nodded, though his curiosity lingered. People talk, he said. Folks noticed. Thomas felt the weight of those words. He knew what people talk meant. Questions, judgments, pressure. After Caleb left, Naya stood very still. I should go, she said softly. I don't want them coming here because of me. Thomas looked at her. Running doesn't always make things safer, he said. Sometimes it just makes them harder. She didn't answer, but her face showed how familiar running was to her. That evening they sat on opposite sides of the small table while Thomas prepared food. The silence stretched, not uncomfortable, just full. Finally, Naya spoke. They took my brother first, she said. Thomas stopped what he was doing but didn't interrupt. He was sent away to learn new ways, she continued. They said it was for his good. We never saw him again. Her words were steady, but her hands shook slightly. Thomas listened, understanding that this was not just a story. It was something she had carried for a long time. When they came for me, she said, my aunt helped me leave. She said the train was my best chance. Thomas nodded slowly. He had heard stories like this before, though never directly from someone living inside one. Hearing it now made the situation clearer and heavier. The next few days passed with quiet tension. Thomas rode into town once to gather supplies and listen for news. He heard murmurs, nothing direct, but enough to tell him that attention had been drawn. No one came to the ranch, but that did not mean they wouldn't. At night, Naya slept lightly. Any sound made her sit up, alert. Thomas noticed and left a lantern burning near her door, a small signal that she was not alone. One afternoon, a letter arrived. No name, just a warning written in rough words. It said that helping runaways brought consequences. Thomas read it once, folded it, and placed it in the stove, watching it burn. He did not show it to Naya. Instead, he spoke to her later that evening. There are people who think you belong to systems and rules, he said carefully. I don't agree with them, but I need you to know that staying here might not be simple. Naya looked down at her hands. Nothing ever is. Thomas studied her face, seeing both strength and exhaustion. I can help you find someone, he said. A church group, maybe, or a family who understands. She met his eyes. I don't want to be passed again, she said. Like an object. The words stayed with him long after she went to sleep. The turning moment came when two men rode past the ranch road the next morning, slowing as they looked toward the house. They didn't stop, but they didn't need to. The message was clear. That night, Thomas made a decision. Not a loud one, not a dramatic one, just a firm one. He would not rush her away to make things easier for himself. He would help her properly, or not at all. When he told Naya, he didn't promise safety forever. He promised honesty. I'll stand with you while we find the right path, he said. Not the fastest one, For the first time since she arrived, Naya smiled. Not wide, not careless, but real. And in that small moment, both of them understood that what had started as a single act of help was becoming something deeper. A shared stand against being ignored, erased, or forced forward without choice. The days ahead would not be easy, but they would be faced together. Days turned into weeks, and life at the ranch slowly found a new rhythm. It was not the kind of change that arrived loudly. There were no big moments or clear signs that things were different. Instead, it showed itself in small ways. Shared meals, quiet work, and conversations that happened without force. Naya began to wake before Thomas some mornings. She would step outside and watch the sky change colors as the sun rose. The land felt open, almost endless, and for the first time in a long while, she did not feel trapped by walls or watched at every moment. Still, she stayed alert. Safety, she had learned, could disappear without warning. Thomas noticed the way she learned quickly. She remembered where tools were kept, how animals behaved, and which tasks needed attention before they were spoken aloud. She did not complain, but she did not rush either. She worked with care, as if each action mattered. One afternoon, while repairing a fence together, Thomas finally asked a question he had been holding back. "Did you ever want something different?" he said. "Before everything started changing for you?" Naya paused, gripping the wire in her hands. "I wanted to learn," she said after a moment, "not to forget who I am, just to understand the world better." Thomas nodded. "That seems fair." She glanced at him, surprised by how easily he said it. Trust did not arrive all at once. It grew slowly, like something fragile that needed patience. Naya still kept parts of herself guarded. Some nights, she would wake suddenly, breath fast, eyes searching the dark. Thomas never asked what she dreamed about. He would simply make sure the lantern was lit and the doors were secured. Meanwhile, pressure from outside did not fade. In town, Thomas noticed familiar faces turning distant. Conversations stopped when he entered a room. A shopkeeper once asked too casually whether he had sorted out that situation yet. Thomas answered politely and left quickly. One evening, a local official came by the ranch. His tone was calm, but his questions were sharp. He asked about Naya's presence, her background, her plans. Thomas answered carefully, saying she was a guest and that no laws were being broken. The man smiled, but it did not reach his eyes. "Things have a way of becoming complicated," he said before leaving. After that visit, the air between Thomas and Naya changed, not colder, but heavier. They both knew something was coming, even if neither said it aloud. A turning point arrived quietly one afternoon when Thomas returned from town earlier than expected. He found Naya sitting by the barn, holding a folded piece of paper. Her face was pale. "It was left near the road," she said. "I didn't open it at first." Thomas took the paper. It was another message, clearer this time. It said she would be taken if she didn't leave soon. No names, no signatures. Naya stood. "I should go," she said. "Now, before this gets worse." Thomas felt the pull of fear and responsibility tighten in his chest. Part of him wanted to agree. Letting her go might protect them both. But another part, the one that had stepped forward at the train, knew that sending her away alone would be no solution at all. "Leaving without a plan puts you in danger," he said. "I won't pretend otherwise." She looked at him, eyes steady. "Staying puts you in danger too." They stood there for a long moment, neither willing to move first. That night, they talked longer than they ever had before, not about escape routes or threats, but about who they were. Thomas spoke of his wife, who had passed years ago, and the quiet life he had chosen afterward. Naya spoke of her family, her language, and the pieces of home she carried in memory.
"I don't want to disappear," she said softly. "I just want to live without being pushed."
Thomas listened, understanding that this was the heart of it. Not hiding, not running, being allowed to exist. The next morning, Thomas made a choice that surprised even himself. He decided to seek help openly, not quietly. There were people, few but real, who believed in fairness, who had helped others before. It would mean attention. It would mean risk. But it would also mean standing in the light. When he told Naya, she studied him carefully. "You don't owe me that," she said. "I know," he replied. "That's why it matters." They traveled together to meet a woman known for helping displaced families. The journey was tense, every sound on the road making Naya's muscles tighten. But when they arrived, the woman listened. She asked questions without judgment and spoke to Naya directly. Not over her. For the first time, Naya felt something shift inside her. Not relief, not safety yet, but possibility. Still, the situation was far from resolved. Word spread quickly. Some supported Thomas quietly. Others grew openly critical. One night, stones were thrown near the ranch house, not hitting anything but close enough to send a message. Thomas repaired the damage the next day without comment. Naya helped, her hands steady but her silence heavy. Later she spoke. "If they come again, I don't want you standing in front of me." Thomas met her eyes. "I won't stand in front of you," he said. "I'll stand beside you." That answer stayed with her. The weeks that followed tested them both. Meetings, questions, waiting. Some days brought hope. Others brought setbacks. But through it all, they learned how to share the weight instead of carrying it alone. What began as a rescue had become a shared fight, not against people, but against a system that refused to see individuals. And in that fight, both Thomas and Naya were changing. Not into heroes, not into symbols, but into people who understood that courage did not always look loud or strong. Sometimes it looked like staying when leaving would be easier. The tension that had been slowly building finally reached a point where it could no longer stay quiet. It did not arrive with shouting or sudden action. Instead, it came in the form of waiting, long pauses and choices that could not be delayed any longer. Thomas and Naya both felt it. Every morning carried a question. Every sound from the road made them look up. Even the land, usually calm and familiar, seemed to hold its breath. The woman who had agreed to help them sent word that a meeting would take place in the nearby town. People from different sides would be there. Officials, community members, and those who believed Naya deserved protection and a voice. It was not a court, but it mattered just as much. What was decided there would shape what came next. Naya was quiet when she heard the news. She sat on the porch steps watching the dust move across the ground. "Do I have to speak?" she asked. "Only if you want to," Thomas replied. "But your words carry weight, more than anyone else's." She nodded slowly. Speaking had always brought consequences in her past. Silence had often felt safer. But she also knew that staying silent now might mean letting others decide her future without her. The morning of the meeting, they left early. The sky was pale and the road stretched ahead of them like a test with no clear end. Thomas drove steadily, his hands firm on the reins. Naya sat beside him, back straight, eyes forward. As they reached town, they noticed how many people had gathered. Some faces were familiar, others not. Conversations stopped as they passed. Naya felt the weight of every look, but she did not lower her head. Inside the meeting hall, the air felt thick. Chairs were arranged in rows and voices echoed softly against the walls. When Thomas and Naya took their seats, the room grew quiet. One by one, people spoke. Some talked about rules and systems, about how things had always been done. Others spoke about fairness, about seeing people instead of labels. The words moved around Naya, sometimes sharp, sometimes careful. Then it was her turn. She stood slowly. For a moment, she said nothing. The silence stretched, heavy and uncomfortable. Then she spoke. "I have been moved my whole life," she said. Her voice was calm, not loud. "Not because I wanted to go, but because others decided for me. I was told it was for my good. I was never asked." She looked around the room. "I am not asking for special treatment. I am asking to be seen, to choose my own path." Her words were simple, but they carried truth. Some people shifted in their seats. Others looked down. A few nodded. When she sat back down, Thomas felt something loosen in his chest. Whatever happened next, she had spoken for herself. That alone mattered. The meeting ended without a clear answer. Decisions, they said, would take time. More discussion. More review. It was not a victory, but it was not a loss either. As they stepped outside, Naya exhaled deeply. "I thought I would freeze," she said. "But I didn't." Thomas smiled faintly. "You were strong." She shook her head. "I was honest." That night, the waiting returned, but it felt different now. Less helpless, more grounded. A few days later, trouble came, not loudly, but firmly. Thomas was approached by officials who made it clear that his actions were being watched. They spoke of consequences, of pressure from higher places, of how easy it would be to make life difficult. Thomas listened without raising his voice. When they finished, he said, "Doing the right thing has never been the easiest path." They left without another word. Naya saw the strain in his face that evening. "If you step away now," she said, "no one would blame you." Thomas looked at her for a long moment. "I wouldn't blame myself either," he admitted, "but I wouldn't respect the choice." The climax did not come as a single event. It came as a series of moments where Thomas chose to stand firm, and Naya chose not to disappear. Letters were written, support slowly grew. A small group of people came forward, offering help, resources, and safe options. Finally, word arrived. A solution had been approved. Naya would be placed under the protection of a group that respected her identity and choices. She would have access to education and community without being cut off from who she was. It was not perfect. It did not erase the past, but it was real. When Thomas told her, Naya sat very still. Then she let out a breath she felt she had been holding for years. "So I don't have to run?" she asked. "No," he said. "Not anymore." The days that followed were filled with preparation. Naya packed the few things she owned. Thomas helped without speaking much. Every movement felt heavy, filled with meaning. On the morning she was to leave, the sky was clear. The ranch looked the same as it always had, but it no longer felt like a temporary shelter. It felt like a place that had mattered. They stood near the road, neither rushing the moment. "You changed my life," Naya said quietly. Thomas shook his head. "You reminded me what it means to do something when it's hard." She smiled, small but steady. "I won't forget this place." "I hope you don't," he said. "And I hope you don't forget who you are." As she left, Thomas watched until the road was empty again. The silence returned, but it was not lonely. It was full. The hardest part was over. not because everything was fixed, but because the choice to stand had been made. And sometimes that choice was the most powerful moment of all. The ranch felt quieter after Naya left, not empty, but changed. The wind still moved across the land, the animals still followed their routines, and the sun still rose and set as it always had. Yet something important had shifted, something that could not be undone or ignored. For the first few days, Thomas kept himself busy. He repaired fences that did not truly need fixing, and cleaned tools that were already clean. Work helped keep his thoughts steady. Still, small reminders appeared everywhere. The extra cup on the shelf, the place where Naya had sat in the mornings, the faint footprints near the barn that the wind had not yet erased. At night, Thomas sat on the porch as he always did, watching the stars fill the sky. He thought about the moment on the train platform, how easily he could have looked away. That single choice had led to weeks of uncertainty, risk, and change. Yet he felt no regret, only a quiet certainty that he had done what was right. Meanwhile, Naya's journey continued. The group that welcomed her treated her with care and patience. They spoke to her directly, asked what she wanted, and listened to her answers. She was given a place to stay, not as a favor, but as a right. For the first time, she was allowed to plan her days without fear of being taken away suddenly. Learning was not easy at first. Some things were unfamiliar, and some memories made it hard to focus. But Naya was determined. She remembered her brother and the path he had been forced onto. She promised herself that her story would be different. She wrote to Thomas when she could. Her letters were simple, but full of meaning. She told him about the people she met, the things she was learning, and the moments when she felt both hopeful and unsure. Thomas read each letter carefully, folding them and placing them in a small box beside his bed. In town, opinions about Thomas slowly changed. Some people still judged him. Others, after seeing how things turned out, began to understand. A few even thanked him quietly, saying his actions had made them think differently. Thomas never spoke much about what he had done. He did not see himself as a hero. He saw himself as someone who had been present when it mattered. One afternoon, months later, Thomas received a final letter. Naya wrote that she had found her footing. She had plans, goals, and people who respected her voice. She ended the letter with words that stayed with him long after he finished reading. "You did not save me," she wrote. "That because my heart, you stood with me until I could stand on my own." Thomas folded the letter carefully and placed it with the others. He stepped outside, letting the fresh air fill his lungs. The land stretched out before him, familiar and steady. Life returned to its quiet rhythm. But Thomas was not the same man he had been before. He noticed things more, the way people were treated, the moments when silence caused harm, the times when stepping forward mattered more than comfort. And somewhere beyond the open land and long roads, Naya was building a life shaped by choice, not force. Their paths had crossed briefly, but the impact of that meeting would last far longer. Not because of grand gestures or loud victories, but because two people had chosen respect, courage, and humanity when it counted most. Sometimes that was enough to change everything.